everyone, I'm so glad to have you on my channel today. If you haven't been here before, welcome. If you have, we're going to get right into some advanced card making techniques. I want to show you my thoughts on masking paper. This is something that I don't do all the time because it is a little time consuming, but it really gives a cool effect on your cards. So we're going to use these two scrapbook.com new stamp sets. We're going to use some masking paper, which I'm going to be using the one from Nicki Designs and Therm. There are tons of them out there, and it really doesn't matter. You could even use something like full stick post-it notes. So we've got lots of options for this. The way I use masking is to layer my images, and it really helps you use the same image over and over again on a card, but make it look more 3D. So we're going to use these colors to create a rainbow tree card. I'm going to pop it up so you'll kind of see where we're going. All right, so here's where we're going today. Lots of fun with these rainbow trees. We need to start by stamping an image on masking paper. So see, this is masking paper, which usually has a back that has some type of writing on it and then a smooth front. You can use any type of ink that you want to stamp on the masking paper. I just used what I had sitting on my desk, which was another Catherine Pooler ink. You do need to let that dry because you're going to be cutting around the entire area. So if you have an ink that dries really well, then that's perfectly fine. We are going to need mask for two trees. So for the large tree in the set and the small tree. So I stamped both of those out. So when you're cutting these out, you want to get as close as possible. So really no white showing. And for me, the top of the tree doesn't matter a whole lot. It's more the lower sides that are going to make a difference. Really, even the bottom of the tree is not going to be a problem on this card. We're kind of just putting the trees next to each other. So it's only going to overlap on one side. The nice thing about masking paper is once you've got this, you don't have to cut this out every single time. You can reuse this piece. It's almost like a plastic slick surface, and so you can stamp over it multiple times without messing up the mask, and it gives you great adhesive and is able to stick back down. Like I said, you could do something like a post-it note. Those are possible. It's just you may have to cut more than your piece of paper like this that's made for masking. So a couple other things I want to point out about masking paper and just cutting out images in general. Like I said, you may be able to do this with a Brother's Scan and Cut and get your cuts close enough. That would be a much easier way than fussy cutting it. But I did want to point out, and I learned this at some point after I'd started card making, was that when you're cutting images out, to use your other hand, not the one that's cutting, to move the paper versus moving your hands with the scissors. And as I get older and my hands have a little bit more pain and arthritis type issues, this is really helpful. So it's just a quick little tip. Always cut that way. And I'm going to get this one completely cut out, and then we're going to start looking at layering images. The other thing I was going to say about masking paper is if you buy an actual masking paper, it doesn't absorb all of the ink. I guess you would say it is not permeable. So if you stamp over it, that ink is not going to go through onto your project. Whereas sometimes with post-it notes, I've had so much ink on the paper, it starts to go through it a little bit. Let's start stamping. Now I'm going to start with my middle image. I want that to be the most forefront part of my card. So kind of like this one is in front of all the other colors. And I say that because for me with masking, it's a lot easier to start with what you want to be in the front and then cover it up and start adding other things. So we're going to get our green tree taken care of. I've lined this up so it's in the middle, and we'll stamp it a couple of times until we get it to the color and that it fills in all of the tree. And then we'll put on our masking. We do need to let it dry just a little bit. This ink dries pretty quickly, but I usually give it at least a couple minutes before I apply a mask. Okay, and here's what that final tree looks like. I'm not too worried about this ink because I also know I'm going to add some heat embossing over this. But what we're going to do is put on the mask that we cut out of this large tree. First, I want to line up where I'm going to stamp my next tree. And then once I've got that stamp on the Misty platform, I'm going to line up my mask. So the way that I'm going to do this, to me, when I was thinking about masking before I understood the concept, when I put this tree in front like this, you would think that what you stamped originally would be in the back of your image. but just think you're covering up so that I'm going to put a big mask over the green tree. And when I stamp that next tree, it's going to look like it's behind it. So just remember, if you're wanting something to stand out, you should probably start with stamping that image first. So that doesn't have to be your middle image or anything like that. In this case, it worked because I was going to use a large tree in the middle, and then I was going to use the smaller ones to the side. So my large tree will be in the forefront of the card. So now I'm lining up this mask, and like I said, the top doesn't matter as much as right now my right side. So really, you don't have to line this up except on the side that you're using. It just happens to fit quite correctly. So now that I've got that nice and pressed down, I have my stamp lined up. It's time to ink up this next tree. One thing you'll notice when you are using masking paper, at least I notice it, is that the masking paper is a little bit higher than the sheet of paper you're stamping on. Not much, it's very thin, but sometimes it makes it hard to get that ink right next to the tree. Do you see how I've got a white space? So I do a lot of pressure right there, and I'm still just slightly off. So if this happens to you, you can fix it by trying to stamp it again. But I found an easy solution that I like to use, and I'm going to take a very fine paintbrush, my ink pad, and just kind of fill it in with dots. So this is just something that to me makes the masking look better. It makes it look more 3D. So you can easily do this and make sure you fill in that space that you're trying to get covered. If you press hard on your Misty, you might be able to get it covered just fine, but I like to add with the paintbrush just to get it done quickly. So I'm going to stamp this one more time in blue, and we'll see how that looks, if it seems like it fills in that area anymore. Okay, here's our second stamp. So this, if you're not doing a solid image, is really not a problem. So if you're stamping lined images and then going to color them, you're not going to have this much of an issue, or you can take a little black pen and add to it. But this with the paintbrush, to me, just makes it extra special that you're not going to see that white. And so I use some of the paper, there's ink that gets on the top of the paper, and then I just use my little ink pad and just kind of apply a little bit right through there. I would suggest using the ink pad more than the paper, because on this paper I've got another color of ink, so you can bring in a little bit, and I think I got just a little green in that area, but I'm going to cover it up with some extra blue and it's not going to be noticeable, but it would definitely be better to touch your ink pad, paint that in, and then go from there. And remember, I'm putting trees on both sides of this large tree. So I'm going to stamp again on this side, and I'm leaving my mask on. So remember, that green tree is actually kind of like a neon green underneath the mask. So I'm leaving the mask on, getting my stamp ready, and I'm really rubbing on this stamp in case there's a little area where it made the white before that just wasn't stamping well. So I'm really rubbing it off and just making sure that I've got the stamp ready, and then we're going to stamp it in a different color. So I feel like this side does better, and remember, I had rubbed that stamp really good with my hand, and the first stamp not so much, but when I apply extra pressure, it could be something about my Misty, or it could be that I really rubbed on this stamp to make sure that it was getting good coverage everywhere. So there's only that teeny tiny line of white right there. I still will use my little paintbrush, and of course I washed my paintbrushes in between so that I can use it, and got it dry, and now I'm going to add just a little bit of that orange. And you can see that I accidentally touched the green masking, and so I did bring just a smidge of green into that orange. Didn't mean to do that, but it's not going to really matter on this card, so no big deal. But just know that you don't need to get rid of your card if you do a little mess up like that, because I'll show you how we're going to cover it up. So now it's time to take this mask off carefully. You want to make sure it doesn't flop back on your paper, because it does have some wet ink on it. And then here we've got our green tree in front and our two side trees behind. Now we're still going to add, we're doing a 5-tree design, so we still need 2 more trees. So we're going to start using our masking for our little bitty trees now and stamp those other pieces. So what seems to work better, so that I don't have the color from the masking, is to use my little paintbrush after the fact. And so I did this here on this little area that I got a little bit of green on and colored it in, and it worked fine. So now we're going to add this little bitty tree, and we'll need to do it on both sides. So we're going to put it on the blue side first, and we're going to stamp in purple. So if you'll look at these trees, we're about to add this over the blue one. It's going to look like our green tree is in the forefront, then our next level is our orange and blue, and then the last level is going to be this purple. So I am showing you, I'm just trying to figure out about where my tree is going to go. I kind of forget, I guess, that I'm masking, but I also want to see how it fits because I don't want to cut the tree off. So I'm just using this little piece of masking to figure out where I'm going to place my stamp as well. So now I'm going to place it on the blue. Like I said, the only edge that really matters is the one on the right because that's where we're going to be stamping. So just make sure you've got that lined up how you want it. So with that mask on, I'm going to stamp in the purple. Same little area causes trouble where it doesn't get exactly at the level that it needs to. It's kind of funny that that purple stamped with almost like white balls in it. So it really requires a couple extra stamps, and it's probably because I got some type of dust or material on the actual stamp. I've been using that stamp a lot. So I'm going to wipe that stamp off really well and try to get those little areas filled in. Okay, so stamping it the second time fills in those little dots. It's because I wiped the stamp off a little bit better. So now we still have that same little white area that we can do with our paintbrush, and I'm going to stamp the next side. Last to stamp is the beautiful pink. So we're going to add the pink tree, and then we're going to do some heat embossing to, one, cover up a couple things, but also just to give our center tree a little bit more interest. Just like I did earlier, I'm using my paintbrush to fill in any white area. I'm actually using, instead of going directly to the paint, to the stamp pad, I'm using it from what's left over in my stamp. So that is really nice with that ink. Okay, now we're going to add our embossing details. So we are going to emboss the middle tree. So anytime you're going to emboss, you need to use a powder tool. So I'm going to add a lot of powder to this panel, and then we're going to use the layering stamp that goes with the large tree. So I'll show you that, and we're just going to do it in like a holographic, just to give it some glittery effects, because who doesn't love a rainbow with glitter? So this is the layer, and it goes a little bit outside the realm of the green tree, which is actually kind of nice because where we overlapped our trees and had any mistakes, it covers it up. So very nice. Just going to add this on. Okay, after doing this, I'm going to add this holographic embossing powder, heat it up. And then when I was looking at this card, I was trying to decide if I wanted to do anything on the background. So you could take it and create some more mask and mask your trees as kind of a group. And you could ink blend the background of this, which would be really cool. It would be very nice, but it's a lot of cutting out mask. So I decided that I would just add some snowflakes to my background, and once I got them sparkling, I felt like they really looked super cute on the card. You can see how that extends a little bit further than the tree, but it covers up some good areas and it just looks awesome. Going to stamp the snowflakes from this Winter Wishes set. I used a lighter color. It's called It's a Boy from Catherine Pooler, and this is not in that same set with Life of the Party. It's in a lighter colored set, and I'm going to do, they've got 2 snowflakes in this set. So I started doing these with a Misty, and then I realized just grabbing an acrylic block would be a lot easier. So I grabbed an acrylic block and stamped all these. Once this ink is dry and I've got these where I want them, then I am going to use my powder tool, and I'm going to go back and re-stamp over all of these snowflakes in Versamark ink. And that just gives them, I'm going to heat emboss them with that same holographic look. I also went and did second generation stamping. Do you know what that is? That's an advanced technique where you stamp on a piece of scrap paper. See, I'm getting most of the ink off, and then I stamp on the thing that I want to. So it gives me a lighter shade of that ink. It's a great way to stretch supplies and get different color looks, while also what I really love about it is that you match that other color perfectly. You're not trying to figure out, okay, which shade of blue would go with this. It's just a lighter shade of what you've already been doing, which is really gives it a great look to me, and I love doing it. Just makes a really nice background. So I'm going to do that second generation stamping. Then I'm going to go in and stamp with Versamark ink and create some glitter effects. Anytime you're embossing, remember you need to use a powder tool. So I need to powder this whole panel really well. So I'm going over, we've already got our heat embossing on our middle tree. We're going to use that same holographic powder and we're going to put it on the snowflakes. So I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be super precise about how I add my Versamark to my snowflakes. I'm just going to use an acrylic block and get it as close as possible because we're just going to be putting that glittery effect around the snowflakes or on top of the snowflakes, and I don't think anyone is going to notice this clear glitter not perfectly on your image. So I'll show you how I do that. I'm just taking my acrylic block with the smallest stamp and I'm going over every single snowflake that I used with VersaMark ink, which is a clear watermark ink. It's made for embossing and it stays wet for a while so the embossing powder will stick to it. Once I get all of these covered, I'm going to add my large snowflakes with the acrylic block and stamping over top of them with the same thing. Then I will add my embossing powder. Next, I added embossing powder and I'm going to tap this off and do some heating and I'll show you the final card. Let me show you some of this glitter. It looks so good. And you want to make sure when you're looking at your card that you don't see glitter where it's not supposed to be. Then I'm going to heat it up and look at how awesome this looks. I'm going to freeze frame it for you to show you all that amazing glitter. It just looks great. So it's harder to see that in a picture than it is up close, so I wanted to show you. So I added some sparkly ribbon that I had in my craft room and the sentiment to this, but I wanted to show you one more product that I feel like for advanced card making is one of my go-tos and I love it. So let me show it to you. It's this stuff. It's a double-sided foam adhesive and it comes in the size basically of your card. You do have to cut it down a little bit and I'm going to be mounting this. But this foam stuff, it really keeps your card straight. So if you had any warping with your heat embossing, it is such a great way to keep your card straight. And it really, to me, makes it look more professional. So if you hadn't gotten some yet, definitely check the link in my description for it. So I hope all of you got something out of this video. I would love to see your masking projects. Feel free to drop them in the comments if ever you do some. But with this masking, yes, it can seem a little overwhelming, but it gives you such a great look, especially if you have limited supplies. I couldn't have gotten this look by die cutting. It wouldn't have been as cohesive and it wouldn't have made that front tree seem like it was standing in the front as the rest of the trees went back behind it. So it really has a great purpose and it can do a whole lot with your stash. So make sure that you stretch that stash and try using stamps in a different way. And if you hadn't done it yet, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. I'd love to have you back on the channel. I have lots of advanced technique videos as well as beginners. So I'll see you soon. Have a great day. Bye.